It is Monday, October 3rd. Donald Trump back on the campaign trail after a bombshell report about his income taxes, how his team is responding as Hillary Clinton does some damage control. Why did she just cancel an appearance with Bernie Sanders? We're live in Washington.
And then breaking overnight, Kim Kardashian tied up and robbed at gunpoint during Fashion Week in Paris, forcing her husband to cancel his concert mid-song. Watch this.
I'm sorry, there's a family emergency. I have to stop the show.
What?
The dramatic details just coming in about what happened behind these doors.
And Hurricane Matthew already drenched Jamaica, but the worst is yet to come. The urgent warning for Americans and where that storm is headed next. Fox and Friends First starts right now.
A little break in the clouds and finally no rain, but good morning. You're watching Fox and Friends First on this Monday morning.
Yeah, hopefully not a manic Monday for you.
That's right.
I'm Heather. Yeah, and I'm Heather Childers. Thank you so much for starting your day and your week with us. We do begin with the race for the White House. Donald Trump back on the campaign trail after responding to a $1 billion income tax bombshell.
And trouble in paradise for the Democrats. Hillary Clinton canceling events with Bernie Sanders after calling his supporters basement dwellers.
Ouch. Kristen Fisher live for us in Washington, D.C. with all the new campaign drama. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning, Heather and Clayton. Well, the Clinton campaign is calling this a bombshell report, the kind that they've been waiting for this entire campaign season. But yesterday, Trump surrogates offered a very different narrative across the Sunday shows. They argued that what this unauthorized partial leak of Trump's tax returns really shows is that he's a genius and a master manipulator of the tax laws. And they believe that's a good thing because who better to fix the tax code than someone who understands it inside and out?
He's a genius. I mean, the reality is absolute genius. First of all, we're talking about 26 years ago. Perfectly legal. We should get that straight immediately. This is a perfectly legal application of the tax code. And he would have been a fool not to take advantage of it.
Now, Trump's not the only one doing damage control after a major leak. Over the weekend, Clinton came under fire after an audio recording of her speaking at a private fundraiser back in February was released. And in it, she described some Sanders supporters as living in their parents' basement. It's a perceived knock on the same young Sanders supporters that Clinton is now desperately trying to court. Trump says this is grounds for Sanders to pull his endorsement. Yesterday, Sanders conceded that the comment bothered him, but he still defended Clinton.
A very important point that she made is that a lot of young people who went into debt, worked very hard to get a good education, get out of school and can't find jobs commensurate with the education that they received. And there's a lot of unhappiness about young people, and this is an issue that we must address.
Now, today, Clinton will deliver a speech on the economy in Ohio, while Trump will hold 2 rallies in Colorado. And then tomorrow, it's the big VP debate. Today, both Mike Pence and Tim Kaine are prepping ahead of their one big chance to shine on the debate stage. Heather and Clayton?
All right, Kristen Fisher live for us this morning, bright and early. Thanks, Kristen.
Yeah, but a little bit more on the tax returns. Donald Trump's team working to turn the new New York Times tax dump into a positive. His top economic advisor, Steve Moore, says that it proves absolutely nothing.
I'm so shocked about how much attention this story has gotten, Judge, frankly. I mean, I read the article and I said, gee, there's nothing there. They had one page of one of his tax returns from, 15, 20 years ago, saying that he had a large $900 million loss on some of his business operations. Now, look, every farmer watching the show, every rancher, every small businessman and woman knows that when you have a loss, you are allowed under federal tax law to carry that forward, Judge, and you can use that to offset against the profits that you make in future years. It's a hallmark of our current tax system. The New York Times article makes it seem like it's some kind of scandal that Donald Trump had this 1 year of loss, and then they have only insinuation, and they kind of imply that he didn't pay any taxes, but they have no idea.
So what do you think? Do Trump's tax returns even matter, and will it hurt him in the race? Tell us what you think on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or send an email to foxfriendsfirst@foxnews.com.
And out of a Fox News alert breaking overnight, Kim Kardashian tied up and robbed at gunpoint in Paris. Masked thieves dressed as police officers stealing millions of dollars in jewelry from her. Kelly Wright joins us live with breaking details on the terrifying plot. Good morning, Kelly.
Yeah, this can be a disturbing thing for anyone, and we're learning more about the alleged robbery of Kim Kardashian West. And the main thing that we want to point out right now is that Kim is okay. The good news for Kim is that she was not physically hurt. That after Paris police say 5 masked armed men dressed as police officers robbed her at gunpoint inside this luxury residence that you're looking at, where she was staying for Paris Fashion Week. Now, police say the armed men tied her up, locked her inside the bathroom before fleeing with $10 million worth of jewelry. Her spokesperson says, and we're quoting this, Kim Kardashian West was held up at gunpoint inside her Paris hotel room this evening by 2 armed masked men dressed as police officers. She is badly shaken but physically unharmed. Kim's husband, Kanye West, learned about his wife being robbed while performing on stage in New York. Upon hearing the news, Kanye abruptly ended his show.
I'm sorry, there's a family emergency. I have to stop the show.
What?
So all we know at this point that he, as the husband and father of 2 children with Kim, has rushed to the scene. We're going to check that to find out if he has arrived in Paris. But police are investigating the alleged robbery. They say the thieves handcuffed the concierge who let them into the building and at gunpoint forced the man to actually lead them to where Kim was staying. It is not known if the couple's 2 children were with her at the time. Police say her family is now under police protection. Earlier this week, we point out that Kim's bodyguard thwarted an attempted assault on her as she was entering a restaurant. She was also attacked in 2014 while attending the Paris Fashion Week. Back to you, Heather.
Unbelievable. Good for him, though. He just canceled the show right off stage,
well,
mid-song.
I would have done the same thing.
Family's important, most important.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, this for you, an urgent manhunt ramping up in Idaho at this hour for a pair of dangerous escapees. Jeffrey Duvall and Juan Cervantes have been on the run since Saturday. Now, Duvall was behind bars for trying to strangle someone, and Cervantes on drug and DUI charges. Unclear how they got out, but the jail is now being slammed for some security issues because this is the 4th jailbreak there in just the last year.
Investigators still desperate for answers in the deadly Hoboken train crash. One of 2 black boxes recovered from a mangled train car wasn't working the day of the accident. The train's engineer, Thomas Gallagher, says he was well rested Thursday morning, telling investigators he approached the pack station at 10 miles an hour. But what happened next is still a mystery. Gallagher says he has no memory of the crash. And right now, it's still unsafe for crews to go into the rubble for the second data recorder.
A more angry protest overnight in the streets of Los Angeles over 2 deadly police shootings. The crowd in traffic getting into a standoff with riot police. The protest coming hours after LAPD officers shot and killed a black man matching the description of a gang suspect. Well, that shooting a day after an armed 18-year-old was shot and killed by officers. He led them on a chase in what is believed to be a stolen car.
Now to some extreme weather. Hurricane Matthew upgraded to a dangerous Category 4 storm overnight, now threatening the Caribbean. American vacation goers urged to get out of its path. The U.S. Navy even evacuating personnel from Guantanamo Bay.
145-mile-an-hour winds already blasting Jamaica, and Matthew could soon set its sights on the U.S. Senior meteorologist Janice Dean is here tracking the storm for us right now and has the latest. Good morning.
Good morning. We're going to be tracking the storm for days, and we just got the latest 5 a.m. advisory, so let's get to it because Hurricane Matthew is going to be impacting the Caribbean. We are really concerned about Haiti. They could get upwards of 30, even 40 inches of rainfall, which could be catastrophic for this region. The last time we had a hurricane that came this far south up towards Haiti was Hazel in 1954, and it killed 1,000 people. So we are so concerned with this hurricane. It's still a Category 4. Winds are down a little bit, which which is good, but we are expecting this storm to continue to strengthen a little bit, then weaken a little bit as it makes its way across Haiti, Jamaica, very concerned here, hurricane warnings there, as well as Cuba, and now into the Bahamas we have hurricane watches. So let's watch this very slow-moving storm, very warm water underneath it. The impact across Haiti, again, could be deadly. So prayers are needed for Haiti as well as Jamaica, and then over eastern Cuba, weakening a little bit. Look at the rainfall we could see. Again, in some cases, isolated amounts of 40 inches of rain, which again is going to be catastrophic for this region. There's the track as we go through time. Still a major hurricane maintaining its strength as it gets into the Bahamas. Look at this, Saturday still off the coastline. We were watching computer models very closely, but really anywhere from Florida to Maine, you need to pay close attention to the path of the storm. We have not had a Category 3 or higher hit the U.S. in 10 years. I'm worried that people are going to be complacent. There is some indication that we could have impact along the East Coast into the weekend.
From Florida to Maine.
Yeah, we need to watch
smokes.
this. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Janice Dean, thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you, Janice.
All right, well, today, Jewish people around the world celebrating the new year. Last night marked the beginning of the Rosh Hashanah holiday.
According to Jewish tradition, the start of the new year is explained by the creation of Adam and Eve.
It's a personal time for reflection and to ask for forgiveness for wrongdoings over the past year.
The Rosh Hashanah celebration ends tomorrow night at sundown. Well, the time now is about 10 minutes after the top of the hour. And coming up, this was a terrifying ride home for some Texas students when their bus flips over. Look.
Anybody get out here?
One of the dramatic moments inside that crash, and what went wrong?
Then scandals haunting both the nominees as they head back on the trail this morning. But which is worse, Trump's taxes or Clinton Foundation pay to play? A fair and balanced debate on the scandals is up next.
And their dad couldn't be there to send them off to the homecoming dance. So wait until you see what these officers did to honor their fallen comrade. This is a great story. Welcome back. The presidential candidates headed back on the campaign trail today. And as they do, they're both haunted by, some new scandals. The New York Times reporting that Donald Trump may have not paid federal taxes for 18 years as more shady dealings unravel from the Clinton Foundation. So, which is worse? Here to weigh in, GOP strategist Noel Nikbor and Democratic strategist Evangeline Gomez. Thank you both for joining us early this morning.
Thank you.
So, Noel, I'll start with you. Is this a big deal? Let's begin with the tax returns.
You know, to me, it pales in comparison, when you're looking at Hillary Clinton's pay-to-play politics. And actually what he did, I'm glad it was leaked. And the reason why is because people have looked over it and there is no wrongdoing. All he did was a lost carryover. A lot of Americans can't really relate to a lost carryover, especially with that magnitude of price point. But there is actually nothing wrong with what he did. And what do people want him to do? You know, if you're for Donald Trump, you're going to be for Donald Trump. If you're looking for something, I guess you can say, oh, he pays no taxes because, he's using every advantage of the tax law. But you know what? Who set up the law? It's people like Hillary Clinton. So he can go back to that. And if you want to go a step further, you can look at her husband, who actually pardoned one of the big tax evaders, which was Big Mark Rich.
And Hillary Clinton herself also used the same thing on a $700,000 loss that she reported in her own tax returns that she released. So, Evangeline, your take.
My take is that this is far more worse for Donald Trump. Why? Because he has run a campaign saying that he's a tax code reformer. But let's look at this here. He has been able to carry these losses to the disadvantage of the working people that he claims to represent. And Democrats are going to have a field day with this because they're going to say, one, it goes right towards his narrative that he's a great businessman. What kind of a great business person carries all of these losses, has a business that doesn't generate any money? Number two, the working people. You're a police officer in Toledo. You're an auto worker. They're the ones who are paying taxes on salaries that are much less. Is it fair to them?
Well, once again, though, they open up the door to have, the similar argument against Hillary Clinton as well. But let's move on to this. Donald Trump slamming Hillary for bashing Bernie Sanders supporters in the leaked recording as Clinton campaign as they attempt to do some damage control. Will this hurt her with millennials? Because so far she's been doing better in that area. Evangeline?
Not at all. This is not an issue. Bernie Sanders has come out and said she was absolutely correct in the statements that she made. In fact, Secretary Clinton showed empathy towards the plight of the millennials. Those millennials who went to college, they took out debt, and now, sadly, because of the economy, they are living at home. The economy has progressed during these last 8 years, but not as quickly and not to the expectations of many of the millennials.
Noelle, finally, you get the last word.
Not at all. I think she actually meant it. Now they're trying to backtrack on it, saying that that's, they're living in their parents' basement as a result to, new tactics. But that is not true. I think she meant it. She's never been a self-declared socialist, and now she's trying to, go in between some of Bernie Sanders' economic policies and her own. It is just not working, and Bernie Sanders people can see right through it.
We will see. We'll see what happens. All right. Thank you both for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Have a great morning.
You too.
All right, now to a Fox Business alert. Newspapers throwing their support behind Hillary Clinton may want to rethink their endorsement. Cheryl Casoni from our sister network, Fox Business, is here to explain why. Good morning, Cheryl.
Yeah, good morning, Clayton. Well, the Arizona Republic, one of 3 newspapers that is losing readers because they have endorsed Hillary Clinton. The New York Times actually finding out these details, talking to one of the top editors there, saying that they were getting 1 cancellation every 10 minutes after they endorsed the Democratic candidate. The Arizona Republic has never in the history of the paper, more than 100 plus years in Arizona, ever endorsed a Democratic candidate. But also the Dallas Morning News and the Cincinnati Enquirer, both, Clayton, have lost readership because they endorsed Clinton.
Well, because newspapers are doing so well right now that they can afford to lose readership right now. Cheryl, talk about Toyota and a new robot friend for the car. What's this about?
Okay, I think you're going to love this, Clayton. The Corobo Mini Robot, so small, 4 inches, it can fit in the cup holder in your car. And this is from Toyota. They've spent more than $1 billion for technology for the car. But this robot, $390, responds to emotions. If it's in the car with you, by the way, if you slam on the brakes, the robot will say, oops, and other things. It'll kind of congratulate you for a job well done for a long drive, things like that.
That's what I have my wife to do, to complain about my driving. I don't need a robot for $390. And it's Halloween time, and we're a big fan of the Doritos around the house. Yeah. But black Doritos, what's this about?
I know, I love Doritos too, Clay, but I'm not sure about this one. Frito-Lay, which is part of PepsiCo, has launched black garlic Doritos in Japan just in time for Halloween. It's garlic pepper Doritos. I'm thinking it's garlic repellent, vampire repellent like you've never seen before, excuse me. Coming up at 5:45, the Department of Homeland Security, guys, confirming that hackers have targeted election systems in 20 states, and now even the FBI is investigating hackers from Russia getting some very valuable information. More details coming up, guys.
All right, Cheryl Casoni for us this morning. Thanks so much, Cheryl.
I think those would be kind of cool because then you smile and all your teeth would be black for Halloween.
And I'm sure Taco Bell is probably already thinking about how they can wrap it around a chalupa or something. Yeah.
Well, the time now is 20 minutes after the top of the hour. And they're not even in this country lawfully. So how did more than 1,000 illegals get to vote in a critical swing state?
And the urgent search for this vandal seen spray painting Black Lives Matter on a Donald Trump property. Welcome back. 23 minutes now past the hour. More than 1,000 illegal aliens found on voter rolls in the crucial battleground state of Virginia. A shocking new watchdog report exposing the voter fraud just weeks before the presidential election. There are now major concerns that illegal voters could sway the election, since the investigation only covered 8 of the state's 133 districts. According to Virginia law, it's a felony for illegals to vote. However, they're not required to show proof of citizenship when they register to vote. Let's keep talking about this morning. Are you worried about how illegals voting would impact the election? Log on to Fox and Friends First, our Facebook page, right after the show for a live debate using that hashtag Keep Talking. Heather?
Some jaw-dropping video shows Donald Trump's brand new hotel being vandalized by Black Lives Matter. You can see the vandals spray painting the side of the building in Washington, D.C. Now, the messages say Black Lives Matter and no justice, no peace. The graffiti has since been covered up with plywood. Despite the video, police do not have any suspects.
And terrifying moments when a school bus packed with children veers off the road and flips over into a ditch, and it was all caught on camera. Watch the inside video.
Anybody get out here?
Geez, you can see students sent flying as the driver swerves to avoid a truck in Houston and then loses control. 16 kids rushed to the hospital with minor injuries. The driver has not been charged.
Scary stuff right here. Cornfield chaos, you could say. A 3-year-old little boy is found safe and sound after being lost in a cornfield for nearly 20 hours. Well, the emotional moments caught on camera as a volunteer eventually spots the toddler in a field behind his northern Wisconsin home.
Once we got a little closer, you could tell it was arms and legs. So I was about 20 feet away from him, and then that's when I took off running. I knew for sure it was him then.
The boy was taken to the hospital and is expected to be just fine. That's the good news. Poor little thing.
Ugh.
Can you imagine?
Those cornfield mazes.
Yeah, his hair matched.
All right, it is 26 minutes now past the hour. The national anthem protest spread in the NFL, and this time police are being targeted. The shocking, unpatriotic moves on the football field.
But first on this day in history, back in 1951, the Giants' Bobby Thompson hit the shot heard round the world and won his team the National League pennant. And then in 1995, O.J. Simpson acquitted.
Wow.
It is Monday, October 3rd. Donald Trump back on the campaign trail as his team does some damage control over his tax dump, saying, if anything, he was smart not to pay taxes.
Absolute genius. First of all, we're talking about 26 years ago. Perfectly legal. We should get that straight immediately. This is a perfectly legal application of the tax code. And he would have been a fool not to take advantage of it.
So we're asking, do you even care about Trump's past tax returns? Your emails pouring in.
And tied up and robbed at gunpoint, Kim Kardashian left shaken after intruders stormed her suite. We're live with the breaking details unfolding overnight in Paris.
And you've heard the expression rock the boat, but how about sway the plane? A jet goes teetering back and forth on the tarmac, and it is not the first time at this particular airport. Fox and Friends First continues right now.
Beginning of October, it feels like a swamp outside, even though it's the beginning of October in New York City. That is a live look from Midtown Manhattan. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Fox and Friends First. I'm Clayton Morris.
And I'm Heather Childers. Thank you so much for joining us. It is half past the top of the hour. And right to the race for the White House, Donald Trump on the campaign trail after responding to a $1 billion income tax bombshell.
And trouble in paradise for the Democrats. Hillary Clinton canceling events with Bernie Sanders after calling his supporters basement dwellers.
Kristen Fisher, live for us in Washington, D.C. with all the new campaign drama. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning. Yeah, guys, I mean, it's October, so here come the surprises. The Clinton campaign is calling this a bombshell report. But Trump surrogates are arguing that what this unauthorized partial leak of Trump's tax returns really shows is that he's a genius and a master manipulator of the tax code.
And the genius of Donald Trump has been to make sure that he follows the law, which is exactly what he's done, and politically he has said that he's going to change these laws and that there's no one who's better suited to change these laws.
Now, Trump's not the only candidate doing damage control after a major leak. Over the weekend, Clinton came under fire after an audio recording of her speaking at a private fundraiser back in February was released. And in it, she described some Bernie Sanders supporters as living in their parents' basement, a perceived knock on the same young Sanders supporters that Clinton is now desperately trying to court. Trump says this is grounds for Sanders to pull his endorsement. Well, yesterday, Sanders did defend Clinton, though he also admitted that her comment bothered him.
Of course it does, but we're in the middle of a campaign, and trust me, if you go to some of the statements that I made about Hillary Clinton, you can see real differences. So we have differences. There's nothing to be surprised about. That's what a campaign is all about.
Now, today, Trump's holding two big rallies in Colorado. Clinton will be campaigning in Ohio. She hasn't been to that battleground state in almost a month, though she did just pick up an endorsement from Cleveland's favorite son, NBA legend LeBron James. Heather and Clayton.
That's a big endorsement in more ways than one.
Well, and early voting there starts today in Ohio. Can you believe it?
No.
That's right. Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's hear Fox News Alert. Breaking overnight. Reality star Kim Kardashian terrorized by thieves at Paris Fashion Week. Masked robbers breaking into her room, tying her up and stealing $10 million worth in jewelry. Kelly Wright is live for us from Washington with the breaking details on this terrifying plot. Kelly, $10 million worth of jewelry?
Yeah, well, someone of her stature would probably carry that around just for the show of it, but you got to know that it's insured. One thing that's valuable is her life, and she still has that. We're learning more about the alleged robbery of Kim Kardashian West, and the main thing that we know right now, as I've stated, is that she's okay. The good news for Kim is that she was not physically hurt. That after Paris police say 5 masked armed men dressed as police officers robbed her at gunpoint inside this luxury residence where she was staying for Paris Fashion Week. Now, police say the armed men tied her up and locked her inside the bathroom before fleeing with that $10 million worth of jewelry we were talking about. Her spokesperson says Kim Kardashian West was held up at gunpoint inside her Paris hotel room this evening by 2 armed masked men dressed as police officers. She is badly shaken but physically unharmed. Kim's husband, Kanye West, learned about his wife being robbed while performing on stage in New York. Upon hearing the news, Kanye abruptly ended his show. Watch.
I'm sorry. Family emergency. I have to stop the show.
And with that, Kanye is believed to have rushed to Kim's side. Police are investigating the alleged robbery at this time. They say the thieves handcuffed the concierge who let them into the building and at gunpoint forced the man to lead them to where Kardashian was staying. It is not known if the couple's 2 children were with Kim at the time. Police say her family is now under police protection. Earlier this week, Kim's bodyguard thwarted an attempted assault on her as she was entering a restaurant. She was also attacked in 2014 while attending Paris Fashion Week. Clayton and Heather?
Certainly glad that she is okay.
And yeah, maybe time to stop traveling with $10 million in jewelry on a regular basis, too. Thanks, Kelly. Well, now to some extreme weather. Hurricane Matthew upgraded to a dangerous Category 4 storm overnight, now threatening the Caribbean. American vacation goers urged to get out of its path. 145-mile-an-hour winds already blasting Jamaica, and Matthew could soon set its sights on the United States. Senior meteorologist Janice Dean is tracking the storm from the Extreme Weather Center. Good morning, Janice.
Good morning, Clayton and Heather. Yeah, we are watching this storm because it potentially could have catastrophic impacts across the Caribbean, including Haiti, Cuba, Jamaica, the Bahamas over the next couple of days. It is a slow mover. It has maintained its Category 4 strength down to 130-mile-per-hour sustained winds. At one point, it was the highest category hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale at Category 5. Sea surface temperatures very warm, warm enough to support or even strengthen this storm as it makes its trek, we think, on top of Haiti over the next couple of days, which could be devastating for them. And then eastern Cuba, concerned for them, and the Bahamas, and then the eastern seaboard. We have to watch this very carefully. We're going to be dealing with this storm well into the weekend and maybe even to early next week. Tropical models. Here are the computer models that we look at when it comes to that cone of uncertainty. Pretty certain what happens in the next couple of days, but after that, it comes very close to the U.S. coastline, perhaps hugging or making a landfall across the Outer Banks, but still 7 days out is not a lot of confidence. The whole Eastern Seaboard needs to watch this system. Clayton, Heather, back to you.
All right. Thanks, Janice.
Yeah.
Ominous. Hey, welcome back. A Fox Business Alert now. The American election system in jeopardy. Homeland Security now admitting that hackers targeted voter registration systems in 20 states. Cheryl Casoni from our sister network, Fox Business, is here with what you need to know about that. Good morning, Cheryl.
Yeah, good morning, Clayton. Well, a government official has confirmed that hackers did indeed target U.S. election systems, with 20 different states in the U.S. under attack. 2 of those, Arizona and Illinois, were named specifically. Officials are pointing to Russian-based hackers for the attempted infiltration, which did successfully access the personal information of 200,000 Illinois voters. And while it's not clear specifically what hackers downloaded or if they tried to make any changes, Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders have both used the term rigged elections, whether they meant rigged by cyber criminals or not. And it turns out that many voters are worried about problems this November. A new poll out Saturday from the Associated Press and Center for Public Affairs found that half of those who support Donald Trump favorably have little or no confidence in the integrity of the November election. Either way, this latest attempt by Russian hackers has cybersecurity experts, federal and state officials on edge. Back to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl. One of the stars of the wildly political Will and Grace reunion hitting back at critics who say that it was a pro-Hillary ad.
She has been a 2-time First Lady.
I've been a 2-time First Lady.
She has been a senator, Secretary of Defense.
State.
Well, actress Deborah Messing, who openly supports Clinton, took to Twitter saying this, quote, "No, it was for #VoteHoney. Jake wasn't going to vote. Karen was for Trump. Will and Grace were for Hillary. Message was, you have to vote. Sitting out is not okay."
And in case you missed it, live from New York, it's Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. This was hilarious. Watch.
This man is clearly unfit to be commander-in-chief.
Wrong.
He is a bully.
Shut up.
He started the birther movement.
You did.
He says climate change is a hoax invented by China.
It's pronounced China.
He hasn't released his tax returns, which means he's either not that rich,
Wrong.
not that charitable,
Wrong.
or he's never paid taxes in his life.
Warmer.
Yep, SNL kicked off their new season mocking both candidates. That is Alec Baldwin impersonating Trump and Kate McKinnon reprising her role as Hillary Clinton. Good
Very
stuff.
funny. Yeah, you can watch the whole clip online.
They made a joke of it on SNL, but Trump's taxes, they're actually becoming a very real issue as the New York Times leaks his 1995 returns.
So we asked you earlier, does it matter, and will it hurt him in the race? Most of you agreeing that it doesn't matter much at all.
B. Harvey emailed to say, Trump's tax returns will not affect my vote. Why haven't they made more issue over Hillary's?
And Brian disagrees, saying, yes, it does matter. He needs to show Americans the truth.
And Patrick says it shows that if Donald can recover from a $994 million loss, he can return the country back to prosperity.
So now let's check in with Steve Doocy to see what's coming up on Fox and Friends. And Steve, yes, do people know who the vice president is currently, and do they care about future vice presidents?
Great question, Clayton. Let's commission a poll. Take a look. ABC did a poll, and 41% of Americans didn't know who Mike Pence was. 46% didn't know who Tim Kaine was. So what am I going to do today? This morning on Fox and Friends, Deuce on the Loose, I'm going to go out onto the streets of New York City and ask people if they know who these guys are, if they can identify them. And what about this?
Brian?
I got a wild card.
So I bet more people will know who that is than the vice presidential
You could be right, because we're going to do it in front of our building.
Yeah.
So anyway, Fox and Friends starts in 11 minutes.
All right, Steve. We'll be watching Fox and Friends in just a few minutes. Thanks, Steve.
But we're not done yet. Stay with us. We'll be right after the break. Welcome back to Fox and Friends. First, making a murderer Stephen Avery a convicted killer, and now a heartbreaker.
I haven't heard from Stephen. I can't do this anymore.
Avery reportedly dumping his fiancée just days before her appearance on Dr. Phil. Avery says that he called off his week-long engagement to Lynn Hartman because she is a, quote, gold digger. Hartman's Dr. Phil episode airs tomorrow.
And he earned an A for this anti-gun control project last year, but now the student is suspended and being forced to undergo a 5-hour psych evaluation. Officials at Manville High School in New Jersey called the police when someone found the old project on a thumb drive in the library. Even though police said he did nothing wrong, the student was suspended last week, and the school says he has to undergo psychological testing before returning to class. That student refused, dropped out, and is now considering a lawsuit.
Well, do you remember the reporter who quit her job live on TV to become a marijuana advocate?
Dedicating all of my energy toward fighting for freedom and fairness, which begins with legalizing marijuana here in Alaska. And as for this job, well, not that I have a choice, but I quit.
Well, 2 years after becoming a viral sensation, she's facing 50 years in prison. Charlotte Green created the Alaska Cannabis Club before pot was legal in the state. Her club was never licensed, and it was targeted by undercover raids. Green calls it a, quote, modern-day lynching.
And a heartwarming homecoming gesture for daughters of a fallen police officer.
It is an absolute honor for us to get to take you girls to the dance, and it is.
Courtney, Brooklyn, and Alicia's dad died in the line of duty in January. And since then, the Ohio officers' co-workers have stepped up, standing in for important moments like this.
Even if he was here today, he'd be here telling us, don't make stupid decisions, be nice, have fun. Aww.
His spirit's still clearly in those girls' hearts.
And his coworkers. Well, the time now is about 6 minutes until the top of the hour, and Hurricane Matthew, it is closing in on the Caribbean. The timeline of when and where it's expected to hit.
And that's not a driveway, that's just a house sitting in the middle of the street. The really wrong move that one homeowner made. And before you leave the house, here's what's happening today. All eyes on Hurricane Matthew, the Category 4 storm expected to slam the southwestern tip of Haiti today before reaching Cuba tomorrow. The storm packing 145-mile-an-hour winds. And Kim Kardashian under police protection at this hour after masked men dressed as police tied her up at gunpoint and stole millions of dollars in jewelry from her. Reps say she is badly shaken but physically unharmed. And on the campaign trail, Hillary Clinton heading to the battleground state of Ohio, while Donald Trump holds events in Virginia and Colorado. And tomorrow, Governor Mike Pence and Senator Tim Kaine gearing up for a face-off in their very first vice presidential debate. It's the only one. Tune into Fox News Channel tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
All right, will do. But now it's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly. And up first, the good. 2 Vietnam vets awarded Silver Stars for their service more than 47 years ago. Ricky Adler and Gary Burka saved the lives of fellow soldiers when their unit was ambushed back in 1969. Even though both men were hurt, they never stopped helping. And the bad, strong winds forcing a plane to ditch its landing moments before touching down. You can see the jet swaying back and forth as it approaches the Birmingham airport in England. The pilot circled around and safely landed on the second try. And finally, the ugly, a house left in the middle of the street after a moving company tried to squeeze it through an Austin, Texas suburb. The house was too wide, took out some trees and power lines, likely to be stuck right there for a couple days.
Don't park that here.
Yeah.
All right, Fox and Friends starts right now.
Bye.
Well, Hillary Clinton already has a problem appealing to the younger voters, the millennials, and this not going to help.
They're children of the Great Recession, and they are living in their parents' basement. The idea that maybe, just maybe, you could be part of a political revolution is pretty appealing. It's a false promise. But I don't think you tell idealistic people, particularly young people, that they've bought into a false promise.
False promise. Well, that leaked audio of Clinton mocking Sanders supporters back in February from a fundraiser back in Virginia. The Clinton camp claims she was just being sympathetic to the plight of young people. But what did she really mean?
For more on this, we turn to political editor for Town Hall and Fox News contributor Guy Benson. Hey, Guy, thanks for being with us.
Hey, good morning.
What did she mean by that?
Well, I think if you look at the context of what Mrs. Clinton said, she wasn't necessarily belittling millennials who supported Bernie Sanders. What she was basically saying was there are a lot of young people graduating from college unable to find good-paying jobs and feel forced to delay their plans for their lives, live in their parents' basements. And so I don't think this is Deplorables 2.0, but it is pretty clearly, in my view, an indictment of the Obama economy. Look who's been in charge for the last 8 years, and she has basically the entire platform that Barack Obama had and wants to continue it for 4 more years. More of the same, which is what Donald Trump has been saying over and over again about her.
And you know, Guy, when she and Bernie, they were supposed to be together today at a campaign event, but mysteriously after this came out, they've decided to put it off for a couple of days. You know, she's going to link arms with him and say we're together on the same page. But in that whole thing where, you know, she talks about these baristas living down in their parents' basement, she distances herself from free college, which she's been promoting, and free health care, and says, I'm more, you know, I'm kind of from center left to center right. So as she tries to get these millennials to vote for her, you realize, wait a minute, she doesn't stand for the stuff we stand for.
And I think part of it also, Steve, is if you're a Bernie supporter who's a young person, you might look at the audio and clips of it and some of the commentary about it and say, well, gosh, you know, is she making fun of me? Is she saying that I bought into a lie that I'm too stupid to understand? Or do you just sort of shrug and say, whatever, she's kind of lame anyway. Of course, she's talking out of both sides of her mouth to different audiences. She can wrap her arms around Bernie Sanders at every event from now until November 8th. I just don't care. Yeah. Are you going to show up and vote in November? Guys, I think that's a challenge for her.
You say it's not deplorable comment 2.0, but there are a lot of millennials that are not happy with this. In fact, there's a tweet from a Sanders supporter, Millennials for Revolution, that says, we aren't in our parents' basements. We are an entire generation of workers who are sick of being shafted by neoliberalism. Hashtag basement dwellers. So that's a comment from someone who is pretty offended by it. Thank you so much for being with us, Guy. That's right.
Sure thing.
All right. Coming up on this.
Hi, thank you, Ainsley. Ahead of tomorrow's first and only vice presidential debate of the 2016 race, more than 40% of the American people cannot name the vice presidential nominee on either party. But the office of VP is an important one, more important than ever, you could argue. And one gaffe could make or break possibly them and maybe the ticket. Remember this moment courtesy of Vice President Dan Quayle in 1992.
Throw that again. Potato, how's it? You're right phonetically. What else? There you go.
Okay, joining us right now is former Special Assistant to President George W. Bush, who advised numerous candidates on debate prep, Scott Jennings. Scott, welcome.
Good morning.
So why should we care about Pence and Kaine?
Well, it's an interesting moment because they're going to drive news cycles for the rest of the week, and it's a close race. So a couple of news cycles lost, and it could hurt your campaign. I don't think either candidate can say something at the debate that will win the election, but they could certainly say something that could hurt you for several days, and in a close race, it could matter.
Absolutely. Especially, I think the most impactful person on the race, it was supposed to be for the positive, ended up being maybe for the negative, was Sarah Palin. For example, this with Katie Couric.
What newspapers and magazines did you regularly read before you were tapped for this to stay informed and to understand the world?
I've read most of them, again, with a great appreciation for the press, for the media.
But like what one specifically, I'm curious that you...
all of them, any of them that have been in front of me over all these years.
That hurt McCain?
You know, I think ultimately Sarah Palin in her debate, that wasn't a debate moment, she actually cleared the bar. I think the bar was pretty low for her in her debate, and they had her prepped up. So that moment was not a great moment for that campaign. But when she actually got behind the podium after some prep time, she was pretty good. So it wasn't a bad night on the VP.
And did you notice, too, how Joe Biden treated her as opposed to Paul Ryan? He knew he was dealing with a woman.
Correct.
And I think that he was gender specific. He was kind of pulled back a little bit.
Yeah, she came out of that debate, I think, looking fine. And old McCain's strategist will tell you, before she joined the ticket, they were here, and after she joined, they popped up in the polls. So I still think they may think Sarah Palin was a net positive.
Interesting. Vice President Joe Biden hops on after one day after announcing, I'm going to run for president, called Barack Obama this.
I mean, you got the first sort of mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice-looking guy. I mean, that's a storybook, man.
He's walking that back immediately.
Yeah, he was. Joe Biden, for whatever reason, has become a politician in American life that can say sort of things that are over the line for other Pauls. and he gets away with it. He's Uncle Joe. And we just sort of slough it off. He's one of those rare guys that can get away.
Right, because he's not running for president. If he was running for president, it would be all, they'd be aiming a bazooka at him, so to speak.
That's right.
Scott, let's talk about Pence and Kaine in particular. Pence is going to be asked a lot about Donald Trump's positions, which are different from his political background. How has he handled it so far, and what do you expect will happen Tuesday?
Well, we'll see how hard Tim Kaine presses it. We've got a lot of news on Donald Trump, the taxes, the spat with Miss Universe, and so how hard will he press? And will Pence then retort by pressing harder on emails and Benghazi and things that didn't come up as much in the first presidential debate?
Which I thought was interesting is Pence has never backed off and said, well, I don't agree with Donald Trump here, ever. But yet Tim Kaine, when it came out to the 50% of Trump's audience was deplorable, he kind of said, I don't agree with that.
Yeah, that's right. They've sometimes not been exactly in league with the top of their ticket. Most of the time, the VPs try to stay in line with the top of their ticket. These two guys strike me that they may be willing to veer off a little bit if they think it enhances their own credibility at that night.
It's interesting, too, is that Pence has been incredible at fixing things. Do you think he can fix things when it comes to taxes, when it comes to Trump's ill-advised remarks about pneumonia staggering and Pennsylvania and talking about Bill Clinton's affairs?
I don't think he can fix things. He can't cure things that are wrong with a campaign, but he can certainly make them worse with a gaffe or coming in unprepared for it. But I think given what's been in the news cycles the last several days, he's got to be ready to not mess it up even further than we may already be.
Interesting. Scott Jennings, thanks so much. Most interesting election cycle ever, and everyone will be watching on Tuesday, too.
No doubt. Yeah.
Mainly because Ainsley will be there. And that was, of course, Monday night's debate. That was some of the highlights. That's right.
Look who's here. It's Rise. Here's Judge Napolitano.
Oh, good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Well, because it was Saturday night, they didn't really have time to respond to the Saturday blockbuster from the New York Times that back in on his 1995 return, Donald Trump declared $916 million worth of business losses, which he could then carry forward and offset any income, which allowed the New York Times and others to speculate, well, maybe he didn't pay taxes for 15 years. You've looked at all the stuff on display. Did Donald Trump do anything wrong?
No. No. In the United States of America, we tell the government what we owe it. The government doesn't tell us. And Congress has given guidelines, very lengthy, very complex guidelines. The tax code, I'm holding my hand about 4 feet off the floor. The tax code is that many pages. That's how complex it is. And if a person goes through the tax code and finds ways to minimize their obligation, they are following the laws that Congress has made available. It's a famous Supreme Court opinion. Oliver Wendell Holmes, who probably wouldn't agree with Donald Trump on anything, said nobody should pay a nickel more than they actually owe. Now, having said that, the issue is, where did the Times get this? And is there a problem with them publishing it? I almost said punishing it, publishing it. We don't know how they got it. They claim they got it in the mail. The return address was Trump Tower.
Watch the reporters
seems to be a joke.
On This Week with George Stephanopoulos, they said that it was just in his mailbox. This woman it was in the mailbox. Then they went to see the accountant who's semi-retired in Florida at 80 years old. He goes, yeah, that's me. I did that.
Okay, so journalistic ethics, they should have presented it to Donald Trump or representatives of his, not somebody that worked for him 30 years ago, and said, is this yours and do you want to comply with it? He's going to be on the show later today, and you can ask him if they did that. I doubt that they did that, but they should have done it. Why? Because they had in their hands a document that is protected by the highest degree of protection we have for civilian documents, not government documents. And once you file it, it achieves the protection of a government document.
His attorney said that they obtained this illegally and that he did not authorize this to be released.
Okay, they probably, the person who put it in their hands probably broke the law. Let's call that person the thief. The thief, whoever that person is, can be criminally liable and civilly liable. But the Times is immune from civil liability. Why? Because Donald Trump has portrayed himself in this campaign as a brilliant businessman whose background is appropriate for the presidency. And part of that brilliance, in his view, is how he dealt with his taxes. So his taxes are what the law calls of material interest to the public. When the publisher, Fox News, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, gets its hands on something that's of material interest to the public, we can reveal it with impunity.
Hillary did the same thing. She took a loss, a $700,000 loss in 2015. The New York Times did as well.
That's how it works. Look, some of the Times conclusions, in my view, are wacky and don't make sense. Right. Just because he had this loss in 1995 doesn't mean he's not paying taxes in 2016. He can explain that to you when you talk to him.
They forward the loss, but we don't know because we don't have his taxes.
Judge, today is the first Monday in October. That means the U.S. Supreme Court convenes with one empty seat.
Yes. Do you know what case they're hearing today, Mr. Kilmeade? What? It will affect whether or not the Washington Redskins can keep their name. Can the government prohibit the use of a name that is offensive to some people? That's how they're starting off. I don't know which way it's going to go, but I do know that the Chief Justice has put off the more controversial cases until after the first of the year, because the new president will presumably have her or his nominee on the court.
But isn't that controversial?
It's very controversial, and that's the one that they are dealing with now. Okay. It doesn't involve the Redskins. It involves a rock group, but the principle is the same.
Interesting stuff. All right, Judge, thank you very much for joining us live.
Just hope they leave the Giants out of this.
Yes, absolutely.
Have a big game tonight.
Go Giants tonight. Right.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Studio E, as in election, 36 days to the big election. Thanks for joining us here on Fox and Friends.
And one day into the vice presidential debate. And, Steve, we did 21st Finger, and it turns out that Ainsley's going to be going to the vice presidential debate, and she's going to be covering it live from Virginia.
Can you believe it?
Are you excited?
I'm really excited. Yeah, first time I've done this.
I think there's a lot at stake. I think it's a lot at stake. I think it's going to be fascinating.
What do you think will happen?
I think Mike Pence and Tim Kaine will be talking about other people, the person at the top of the ticket more than each other, because if they go at each other, it is going to be an intellectual debate about policy, and people will nod off.
Right. And one thing that Mr. Kaine is going to hammer Mr. Pence over is Donald Trump and his taxes, because this was the big story. The New York Times got 3 pages anonymously of Donald Trump's taxes. One, the front page of his New Jersey return, of his New York return, of his Connecticut return. What it showed was that he had a big loss back in 1995, and then he was able to essentially use that to offset any income. Essentially, he followed the law. The bombshell from the New York Times is Donald Trump follows the tax law.
Yeah, he followed the law, and he wrote off $916 million, a lot of money, but he did it the right way according to the tax laws. He says that he knows tax laws better than anyone else. If he does win, he can fix them.
Yeah, and Chris Christie and Rudy Giuliani were out there pushing back, saying there's nothing illegal happening here. And by the way, can we find out why someone released this? Was it someone at the IRS? Was it somebody?
Get this. It was someone within Donald Trump's campaign, according to the New York Times. They say that last month, someone within his campaign that works at Trump Tower in New York City released these documents.
But they said it's on a Trump Tower envelope.
Right, I think they just wrote that up in the corner. Right. I think it was a joke. You never know. It could have been Ivanka. Maybe she's had enough. She's had it up to here. Here's my dad's income tax.
Right. We don't know. And, maybe, Ainsley, you are right. Maybe it came from the inside. Maybe it came from the IRS. Maybe it came from somebody within the...
a dirty trickster.
Yeah.
Well, according to that article, that's what it said. And they called the guy who did the taxes, and he said it was accurate.
Yeah, they went down to, he's 80 years old now, semi-retired. He said, yeah, this is me. And the reason why that 9's there, because there was I had to put in a typewriter to put it into that.
The question is, though, is it legal? Is it legal for them to print an IRS document that they didn't get permission to do?
Federal law makes it illegal to publish an unauthorized tax return. Rudy Giuliani says Donald Trump is actually smart when it comes to taxes.
The reality is, he's a genius. What he did was he took advantage of something that could save his enterprise, and he did something we admire in America. He came back.
We've had a basically jobless recovery where we've had growth of less than 2% for 2 years. That's pathetic. Don't you think a man who has this kind of economic genius is a lot better for the United States than a woman, and the only thing she's ever produced? There's a lot of work for the FBI checking out her emails.
Well, Stuart Varney joins us right now here on the Curvy Couch early on this Monday morning. Stuart, he didn't do anything wrong.
No, he did not do anything wrong at all. Nothing illegal, nothing unethical. I've done it myself, actually, as have a lot of other taxpayers. You lose capital. In my case, it was on a real estate deal. You can carry forward that loss to offset
your income.
Thank you, Steve. Offset it against future income. I've done it myself. Millions of Americans have done it. He did it on a very large scale.
Here's the ironic thing, though. Hillary Clinton has done it. She's calling it a scheme, yet in 2015, she took a $700,000 loss. And the New York Times, they're saying Donald Trump, avoided paying taxes. Well, guess what? So did they. They didn't pay any taxes in 2014, and they got a tax refund of $3.5 million.
They left that out of the story.
Right.
Look, it could be a political problem for Donald Trump. I mean, see, the rich don't pay their fair share. Right. But it's also an opportunity for Donald Trump to turn this around and say, look, we need tax reform, and I've got a plan. If he can pivot, he can cancel out the political problem from this $900 million
What about
loss.
critics that say, wow, this shows he's a bad businessman? He lost $25 million on the airline. He lost $43 million on a Castle Casino. What about the fact that he lost like that?
Doesn't it also show that he's rebounded very nicely, thank you very much indeed, and rebuilt the business, which was in bad shape in the early 1990s? He got into airlines, he got into casinos, didn't work. He bounces back, and now he's got his name on buildings all around the world.
That's probably what billionaires do, right? They take risks, and then they end up losing a lot and trying to make it back.
He's an entrepreneur who has bounced back very, very well indeed.
But if you look at people that have picked up their business, left from California, go to Texas. Why? Because they want to pay less taxes. You look at Derek Jeter, the beloved Derek Jeter. He has his residence in Tampa because he doesn't want to pay New York taxes. That's what you do if you are smart. You cut coupons. If you're very rich, you cut corners within the law.
Is there a single viewer watching this program right now who hasn't tried to minimize their tax? Everybody does this. Legitimately does it.
Here's the question. Is there a single viewer watching right now who has paid more tax than they were supposed to? Because that's just crazy, isn't it?
That would be crazy. That would indeed be crazy.
But Stuart, here's a big question. If he just released his taxes, would we be looking at this so-called October surprise #1? I'm sure there'll be 20 more. If he just released his taxes early, did he bring this on himself?
We are assuming that he did not pay any federal income tax for 18 years.
I'm not.
We don't know that. He may not have, but we don't know that. Maybe if he released his tax returns, we could find out.
Sure.
Did you or didn't you? Maybe it was a political mistake way back not to release them when everybody was urging him to release them. That may be a political mistake.
The funny thing about the New York Times is there are a lot of maybes. Well, maybe this happened. Maybe he wound up making so much money the next year it canceled out that credit.
So, all right, let's talk about also Hillary Clinton was out on the campaign trail over the weekend. She's been campaigning with Bernie Sanders, but she canceled the latest event with him because she said this about his supporters that made a lot of people upset. Listen.
There's just a deep desire to believe that, you know, we can have free college, free health care, that what we've done hasn't gone far enough and we just need to, you know, go as far as, you know, Scandinavia, whatever that means. They're children of the Great Recession, and they are living in their parents' basement. If you're feeling that you're consigned to, you know, being a barista or, you know, some other job that doesn't pay a lot and doesn't have much of a ladder of opportunity attached to it, then the idea that maybe, just maybe, you could be part of a political revolution is pretty appealing.
Okay. So she's saying Bernie Sanders' ideas of free college and free health care are unrealistic.
She is. She's
embracing that policy now.
Yes, that's what she stands for now. Free college and free health care, or more free health care. So she hasn't changed her position in public, but she changed her position in private and talked down to these baristas in their mother's basement.
This is what's so interesting. We were playing clips last week of what Michelle Obama was saying about Hillary Clinton when she was running against her husband. And now they're best friends. And then now we're showing video of Hillary, and we were showing video of Hillary and Bernie hating each other a few months ago. And now they're supposed to be campaigning together. I mean, the political, it's just, it boggles me.
It makes you realize why people don't trust politicians.
Right.
Say one thing today and something totally different another day.
Speaking of today, she was supposed to be campaigning with him today, but on the heels of this thing, this tape
She's
that
not.
was, yeah, they put it off. Maybe they'll be together on Wednesday. Also, what's interesting is while she's trying to appeal to Bernie Sanders' far-left supporters, she said in that tape that was recorded in February down in Virginia, she said, I'm pretty much across the political spectrum from the center-left right through to the center-right.
No, you're not.
That's what she said.
You're center-left and then some left.
Right.
Yeah, you are.
But, Stuart, if 50% of the Donald Trump reporters are deplorable, and now supporters are deplorable, and now the Bernie Sanders people are delusional, who exactly is she trying to get, and what does she actually think of the electorate?
I just wonder what she's got left, because she's talked down to vast sections of the electorate. Right. I mean, I was personally offended by the idea that you're a racist, sexist, Islamophobe, etc., 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 because you support Donald Trump. That's a very offensive thing to say. And that's millions of Americans indicted as being deplorable and irredeemable.
And how much smarter would Donald Trump have been to emphasize that instead of going after Hillary's wobble on pneumonia and talking about other things that her husband did in the 90s?
Look, I think Donald Trump is coming off a bad week.
Terrible.
The beauty
and it didn't
queen
have to be that way.
And the tax, I think he's got an opportunity to pivot as of right now and get back on the offensive.
Sure.
Let's see him do
and
it.
he very well could, because you're saying this week he had or last week he had a bad week. The week before that she had a really bad
That's
week.
right.
The week before that he had a bad week.
It's a fantastic
it's
election.
a
I mean, it's like this. It's like this. I mean, you got to stay tuned.
Now we need to look at the calendar and see where it's going to end up. Who's going to have the good week when it comes to the election, and then whoever that is, that's the winner.
What is it, 5 weeks left? We got 5 more weeks of this.
All right. Stuart, thank you very much.
I absolutely love it.
She lost the teen in a basement vote, for sure. Absolutely. And the barista vote is out the window. All right.
Always was.
Thanks, Stuart.
All right. Thank you, Stuart.
Thanks, everyone.